Hi, I'm Duncan. I'm a musician, a recording enthusiast, and the owner of this small studio just outside of greater Nashville, Tennessee. Um, for those of you that regularly watch my videos, you probably have noticed that there's been a slight change of scenery around here. Um, and also that I have not been on my usual schedule this week. My apologies for the latter part of that, but I'm happy to report that I had a client to come in, and we did a piano session in the middle of this week, and I thoroughly enjoyed getting to do that. It's somebody that I haven't worked with in a while, so it was very nice to reconnect with him. And probably will have a little bit more to share about that once he's um, released the videos on his own YouTube channel. So hopefully I'll come back there and perhaps he'll be able to come and do a live session here on this channel at some point in the future. But what I really wanted to convey about this week's session was that on the way out, my client and I were having a pleasant wrap-up kind of chat about how things had gone, and one of the three pieces that he performed was an original composition that he's had around for quite a while, it sounds like, all the way back to having played it on his college audition. And he was saying that the performance that he did for this session on camera, he thought might have been just about the best realized version that he could think of. And I was really touched by that, just to be able to have been a part of that. And it exemplifies a lot about what my goals are and would be as a burgeoning studio owner. When somebody tells me that they came in and the setting helped them get to that place for something that they have such a long relationship with as a piece of repertoire, I felt good about that. So I look forward to sharing a little bit more about that hopefully in the near future. But also just because of the necessity of breaking down the microphones to do the piano session, I also realized it was time to set the drums aside for a while so that I could properly get into this next series of videos that I've been kind of teasing and talking about over the last week and a half. But I want to start going into the real deep dives that I've been kind of planning out for a while. So today, the story that I wanted to share with you all is the background of how I first encountered this amplifier, the Vox V125, and just some of the kind of really surprising and interesting things about my experience and discoveries along the way, which basically gave rise to the plans that I currently have and these series of compare and contrast videos that I want to do. So basically, as a guitar player, I've mostly focused on some of the main brands over the years. Like Fender is the first amp maker that I ever had access to, and I've still got that amplifier here today, back behind me in the corner with the silver strip across the front. That's a twin reverb with some kind of cool odd features, so I'll talk about some other time. And then later on, got access to Marshall 50 watt that I played for quite a long time until I essentially traded that in to get something that was a lot more practical for more context, which was the 20 watt version of the Marshall that's kind of directly over my shoulder. And as I was going further into my recording hobby and starting to transition into treating it more as something that could be turned into a side business. Um, I was thinking about the need to be able to cater to, um, my focus right now is definitely I could offer this space for people to come in and do overdubs really well. I believe you could get a full group in here, but it's a little bit tight. But just like I did with the pianists that came in here earlier this week, having people come in individually and do overdubs, and so um, having good options for guitarists to come in would probably be something that would be worth investing in. And as I started giving more thought to that, I recognized that one corner of that whole amp world that's a really popular option, and one that I might need to consider getting into my amp locker, is a Vox amplifier. Vox is a British manufacturer that it's been around since about 1960. They've been through a number of different owners through the course of the decades. Right now, since the late 80s, they've been owned by a pretty well recognized brand, Korg, which owns a lot of. There's a big conglomerate of all these manufacturers, and I can't even keep track with most of that. But Vox was the sound of the British invasion. You probably can see the ones over underneath of the piano. And probably instantly identify those with all the classic photos of the Beatles during their first couple of tours of the U.S. in the the mid 1960s, 63, 64, and those amps have been just like a huge cornerstone of music like history since then. And so many artists have used them, and they've got a real distinct kind of sound and characteristic. And I started thinking about, I really need to look into getting something from that particular corner of the amp world, into my my set that I've got here. And so I had established a relationship with a shop down in Nashville, through whom I'd run a number of my amps that like the ones I just mentioned, my Fender and my Marshall amp, and they did a fantastic job. And as I've been going in there, they have a small storeroom, or storefront rather, with a few used and new amps. And I happened to notice the Vox amp to the left of the two, the one that's missing the nameplate on it, was sitting there on the showroom floor, and I asked for a chance to check it out. So I plugged in and played for a while, and it was so unique and so fascinating. And so I came away from that, and I did some research, found out a little bit about the V125, and decided to pull the trigger on it. I brought it home and enjoyed it for a couple of weeks before I got a little overzealous with it one day, and might or might not have accidentally done some damage to one of the speaker cones. And so back to the bench it went. And in this meantime, I'm still just completely obsessed with trying to find out everything I can about these relatively rare amplifiers. There's just like a real dearth of information out there. A couple of articles, but like archived from old gear magazines and stuff like that, but real scarcity of information. And so while the amp's on the bench, I see a very cheaply priced V125 go on sale on a major retailer website. And so I figure, okay, well, at this price point, it's probably got to need major work. But since this is a relatively rare amp, and I would like to have intentions of making sure that I can, keep one up and running, I decided to pull the trigger on that one as well. And so I got that home, and as soon as it came in, I started noticing odd discrepancies about it. And I'll go into full detail in a future video about what those kind of discrepancies were. But what I discovered is that the V125 that I had originally purchased was a very, very special amp, and it was fully customized in a way where essentially the V125 had been first manufactured in a head-only version, and then the following year it had been manufactured as a combo version. These different versions were known as the V125 Lead, which was the head-only version, and the V125 Climax, which was the combo version. And my assumption had been that I had purchased a V125 Climax, and that was what I was getting a duplicate of. But the V125 Climax has some very different features, and of course, if you're looking at the two of them side by side, you can see how this kind of confusion could really arise because of how modular these products are. That it's kind of like a lot of other kinds of really well-branded things like Marantz. Marantz receivers are very modular like that. With just lacking the nameplate on it, who could have really known for sure it has all the components that would appear to be the V125 in a fitting case for it? But lo and behold, it's some crafty person who knew what they were doing clearly and was able to transplant the head unit, the guts from that, into the box to basically create their own combo. And I thought that was extremely interesting. And so, of course, that sent me down another rabbit hole altogether about what are the differences between these two versions of the V125. And today, I do want to talk about one in particular, because it's going to pertain to what I get into when I demonstrate the differences and what I think the strengths of each version are. So over here on my screen, you can see this is a flyer. It must be an early flyer announcing the some of the new product lines that were coming out this year. The V series, that was an original contribution to the product line, unique to the Rose Morris era of Vox's ownership. And in here, what I want to point out is the control panel. So zooming in on this, here we've got a mostly accurate representation of what you see on the top of the amplifier, the volume and the standby switch. I'm sorry, the on switch and then the standby switch, master volume. It's unique 5-tone control tone stack. And over here, this is the key part. The V125 Climax features this knob over here that's labeled as Distortion. And that contrasts with the head version. There we go. You'll recognize that they're almost identical, with the exception that the last knob is not a distortion knob. It's labeled sensitivity. So that question led me to seek help from the shop in confirming what the actual makeup of the V125 Climax was internally. There was no information about that version that was available. I've actually seen one person that has done a lot of work on providing information about the V125's. That person had provided a schematic of the V125 Lead, which is, again, that's what we're looking at here. But they were asking if anybody could possibly provide information about the 125 Climax. And so I, in pursuit of that question, I got the help of the shop, who provided me a full map, which is still mostly hieroglyphs, or I guess, yeah, hieroglyphs to me. But he also gave some annotations on here that were extremely helpful. And I'll go into those. Those will be part of the substance of some of the future deep dive videos. But the takeaway from this is that the significance of that distortion knob relates to the way that amp handles its overdrive. And in my taste, it handles distortion in a way that I don't enjoy. It's something that I've moved away from just because it's kind of the function of a lot of traditional distortion pedals, which is to be distinguished from natural analog tube saturation and the creation of even order harmonic distortion. And so that's so much to say that there ain't nothing I want to use on the Climax when it comes to overdriven, crunchy, hot kind of sounds. But beneath that, it's the exact same platform as a clean amp as the V125 lead. So from that standpoint, I started to formulate some ideas about how they might be used in conjunction with each other, but also, as I'm still evaluating the question of the place for a Vox amplifier in my amp locker here as a studio owner. That's kind of what I am seeking to work out and decide. It could be very interesting from an artistic standpoint, and surely I'd like to see what that might look like and feel like for me as a player and with my kind of idiosyncratic approach. But also, I think the main thing that I'm seeking to do here with this is to provide information. I see a small handful of people out there that are that enjoy these amplifiers, that have come across them and made their own little contributions to try to get the word out and share about them. And at the very least, I'd like to do something in furtherance of that conversation. So from here, what I think I'd like to do, now that I've kind of explained the story of how they came in to my world and my purpose here in terms of what I want to be doing with these subsequent deep dives, I do want to go through and do a short demonstration and discussion of each of the two versions. So first up, I'm going to get set up over here and go through what I'm going to be using, or what I think is going to be the ideal use for the V125 Climax. Okay, so to begin with the V125 Climax, I actually want to read y'all a little bit from this archived write-up on the V125 that was contemporary with the new release of the amp. This is actually one of the articles that I most heavily leaned upon when I was reading up about the V125 at first, because my impression is that that's what I was looking at in the shop, and you can understand why anybody would have been likely to come to that conclusion first. And also, what I think is funny is that I'll probably point this out in more detail in a future video, but so many of the marketing shots and things of the amp have the corner, the lower right corner of the amp obscured, which is where the name badge traditionally lives on all Vox amps. That, it'll say AC30, top boost, whatever there, and my Climax normally would, but it needs to be re-glued on. so they famously do fall off. But it was kind of hard to find a picture of a V125 Climax with the badging on it that actually says that. So that was like a mystery to me for a while, to be like, did they ever actually call it the Climax? Is this just a nickname that it got? It was very confusing, but I guess that's kind of in the territory of a obscure amplifier, like this. So I want to come down here a little bit to one passage in particular that I really think I agree with and sums up the strong suits of the Climax really well. Here we go. It may seem externally like a scaled-up AC30, but internally it bears 4 EL34 valves for power rating in excess of 100 watts and drives 2 excellent Fein 12-inch speakers, a far cry indeed from the old 12-inch speakers of past AC30 fame. The Climax is very well made, but there's just no getting away from the fact that possibly through the fear of alienating traditional Vox users, maybe especially in the USA, the Climax doesn't actually look particularly modern, although its features and facilities are. I'll talk about that definitely in a deeper dive. That's what I think is probably the transistor initial gain stage that these things come with out of the factory. The control panel too shows that the Vox design team are thinking modern with regard to facilities. I keep thinking faculties, but yeah, I guess these are facilities. They provide you with 2 inputs, normal and brilliant. That'll be important, so remember that later. And a distortion pot, like I've already talked about. Preamp gain, and then an equalization section offering cut and boost individually on each pot of 100 Hz, 250 Hz, 500 Hz, and 2.3 kilohertz. 1.5 kilohertz. Next off, we find a master volume pot. They're all the old Vox pointed knobs, by the way, and then 2 metal flick switches, one for the mains, other for the standby. I'm going to skip over the comments on the back panel. And so we come to the acid test, that point where one either finds one's worries about this combo's rather dated looks indicative of the sound or not. Rather than take the obvious route to produce a simply louder AC30, Vox have chosen to make a phenomenally loud and ultra bright clean combo with a decibel per watt output that must be staggering. Boy, this amp is loud. Yeah, so that, especially that last bit there, is definitely what I would emphasize there. I do want to take this a little bit further. Sorry, I keep thinking that I'm done, but I really like this next passage as well. The uncanny thing about the Climax is its smooth valve, aka tube, cleanliness. There's little to be gained from setting the preamp up against the master volume with this amp. Even driving it with a Gibson using a pair of extra powerful humbuckers, that isn't the way to get valve distortion from it. This is where the distortion pot comes in. The Vox features a separate valve in the preamp chain, an ECC83 or 12AX7, as we term them over here in the US, which is there to wind on an overdrive when wanted. Well, that's kind of dressing up what's really going on with the V125 Climax. It's doing that part of that 12AX7 that's being kind of singled out has to do with driving a what do you call it? A diode clipping kind of circuit, which is what you get in a lot of traditional distortion pedals, and it's extremely different from just like a electromagnetic, and I guess also from a subsequently a aural standpoint. It's very different from what's going on acoustically with tube saturation and even order harmonic distortion. That's basically, in plain English, that's just straight tube amp overdrive, And I've become a little bit of a purist about that kind of thing. For me, it has to do with feeling, because I do believe that even my ears are fallible when I'm listening. But but from a playing standpoint, I think it makes a substantial difference to me. Um, and this approach to distortion, it was real, what's the word, de rigueur at the time. These are parts of what the reviewer was describing as modern amenities. Um, and, you know, I don't necessarily share that aesthetic point of view, and I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum. Um, but that's kind of what landed me to focus on what he described here as that it's smooth tube cleanliness. That, I think, in that regard, the Climax is a stellar amp. I love playing it. It's kind of comparable to a twin reverb a little bit, but it's really its own thing. That tone control part, that's a really unique feature that just makes it different than any other amp with its tone stack options that I've dealt with before. So that there's been kind of a learning curve between the two versions of the V125 for me on how best to make use of that unique tone stack. But with the V125 Climax, yeah, it just when it comes to clean playing, so that can be like, much more chill, mellow kind of styles, soul, R&B, funk, those kinds of things. It just kicks ass. So I'm going to go off mic here and do hopefully a very concise demo of a couple of different styles that this amplifier really, really complements. Okay, so that was the V125 Climax. Hope that you could kind of hear through some of those little tidbits there, kind of what the article and I were saying about the brightness and the smooth cleanness of the amp. Again, no comment on the quality of the playing there as always, but But yeah, enough for you to, I think, get the picture. Um, before I move on to the V125 lead, I also realized I forgot part of the story of how I got here with both of the amps working. So when I had sent the V125 Climax, which is at the time I was thinking of as the parts unit, down to the shop for being mapped out, they went through and did the inspection to check the condition, and I had trouble getting it to power up and play when it came in, so I was fully of the mindset, it's a parts unit, and that's all I expected it to be. But they came back and told me that it had relatively superficial issues, nothing that was going to be that cost prohibitive to actually bring it up to working condition. So with that being the case, I had them do that as well while it was on the bench for being mapped out. And that's where the experiment really began and proper. And I've been kind of thinking about what I would want to do with this over the last few months while I've kind of been chasing one onto the bench after the other and back and forth through a couple of turns. But anyway, now I do want to shift to an introduction and overview of the V125 lead, which is the original amp that I bought. That would be the amplifier to the left in the shot with the piano, the one that's missing the name plating and badging and all that stuff. So again, what you're looking at there is not the way that the amplifier would have arrived from the shop at all. In fact, what you're looking at here in my browser window, that is actually what the original configuration would have looked like. So you have on the top the standalone amplifier unit, and then beneath it the separate 2x12 speaker enclosure. That's a picture of the V125 bass version, which I'll probably talk about a little bit, more in the context of the Climax deep dive, because I consider the two of them more similar to one another. And yeah, here at the bottom you can see one of the pictures that I was using earlier for the panel of the lead version. But here's just another good picture so that you can kind of see what the lead version looked like as a standalone head. And basically they would have pulled, the guts out of this and dropped it into the box of a probably an AC30, just like that other article was saying about how the thing looked so much like a AC30, like they called it it looks like an act of incest between that and something else. But here that was how the amplifier to the left began life. And then it was, transplanted, like an abnormal brain into a different body. And instead of having to have the two separated like that, you had a much more, portable combo version. And I wonder about the person who made this this transplant, and I wonder if they had if this was done after the V125 Climax had come around, and they decided that they had tried the V125's Distortion and hated it like I kind of do, and said, okay, well, I like the sound of my lead version because it can be treated just like a Marshall JCM 800 and be used as a really screaming high gain amp. But I want that with the convenience of a combo, and I'm not getting that out of the official Vox offerings. I wonder if they did that, or I wonder if it was something where they just made the leap right away, like before the Climax had even hit the market, and they said, oh, I love my V125 lead, but you know what? it would be better if I could actually put this thing in a more convenient body, and maybe they had some kind of experience or knowledge from working for or with Vox, so that they would have known that it was possible to make this transplant so seamlessly. Um, so that I think is just absolutely fascinating. Um, and that I think is kind of the culmination of the story, the background of how I came to be introduced to these amps. But and there were so many other special bells and whistles on the lead amp that's over there, that I don't want to go into full detail because this is already an overlong video here. But when I do the individual video about my V125 lead combo, I'll definitely get into all the cool details and mods that have been made to it. But for now, I'm going to dive in, do another brief, hopefully painless demo of the V125's capabilities, particularly using it, like I said, as a high gain channel. And I do want to use that, start emphasizing that word, thinking of these as distinct channels, because of the similarity. And actually, that is sort of the last kind of thing that I'll just say as a technical standpoint before I just get into the last little demonstration here, then make my closing comments or whatever. But from the notes that my tech gave me when he went in and explored the V125 Climax and gave me the schematic, it's a little bit small for you to be able to read over there, but basically he said that he told me that if you plug into what's labeled as the normal input channel on the Climax, because again, each of these amps have two inputs, one that's labeled normal, and then another one that's an extra bright sounding channel called the brilliant channel. And sort of the way to link and get the most parity between these amps is to plug into the normal channel of the Climax and the brilliant channel of the lead. Those are almost a one-to-one in terms of everything else. So doing so, I'm trying to kind of do an approximation of what it might be like to have one of these amps that has all in one box the multi-channel kind of opportunities that you would see that started to come around a little bit after this. With I associate that with Mesa Boogies, that those were kind of some of the first amps where you had a true tube through the whole amplifier. It's all a tube dedicated clean channel and a separated tube overdrive high gain channel that could be accessed just with a foot switch. And this is like it's like a really cumbersome way to get there, but at least in the name of trying to provide some interesting information about these relatively rare and I think personally underappreciated amps, it seems like a worthy excursion. So I've been running my mouth too long now. I think I just want to get into the playing, so I'm gonna rock out a little bit now and do some stuff that's more hard rock, and I don't quite go metal, but I've also heard people say that it sounds like metal. I think of it as just me. So I'm gonna do some of that, and hopefully you'll get a little bit of a flavor of what the V125 lead's personality is like. Okay, I hope nobody got harmed out there during the making of that. I know somebody here did. Phew. Oh man, there were some real stinkers to that. But yeah, I think that also kind of gives you some demonstrations of the kind of things that you might want to use this amp for and what it's well suited for. It is so unique. A lot of it is, similar to something that like a Marshall stack sound, but it's got that kind of really kind of thick around the middle Vox voice to it. So it's cutting a very unique kind of niche. It's going to be interesting to go further into this a little bit more in a future video, but for now, I've had a lot of fun sharing with you the story of how I first encountered these amps and kind of the genesis behind this project that I'm working on, which I've been jokingly referring to as the W250 Experiment. What do you get when you combine two V125's? Get it? And I think I'm going to leave it at that today. So I'm sorry again to be getting this video out late, but I hope you all can understand I had a good reason for that, and that is that I'm doing more work here in the studio, and I want to be bringing clients in. I want to be collaborating with people, and that's a great thing, and it's really fulfilling. So thanks for hanging out and listening to me tell you about a couple of obscure amplifiers from some British manufacturer that's been around since the 60s. Hope you all have a great day, and hope that if you enjoyed this video that you'll check out my other videos and maybe think about subscribing to the channel. This is what I do here, and I'm really excited to continue sharing the work that I'm doing here, developing the studio and my use of the equipment and what can be done with it here. So take care, and hope to see you soon.